for the World Humanitarian Day, which is not a target. So what are they really talking about? What do they mean not a target? Is it that you are not a target, or they are not a target, or everyone in the world is not a target? But there's so much more we're going to talk about on World Humanitarian Day. This is the day to acknowledge the fact that we have humanitarians amongst us, and they're doing a lot to help humans. And one very big popular humanitarian organization that we all know is the Red Cross, and that's why I have two special guests from the Red Cross today to talk about this with me. All right, very close to me here is Dr. Dan Inowahumema. Such a long name.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, and Tejiri Asinaba, you saw him recently on the show when we talked about you. You're in Red Cross, you're with NANS, you're everywhere. Stay one place.
We have to save one way or the other. We find ways to save.
Okay, it's good to have you. Tejiri is the media dissemination officer, Red Cross Edo State branch, and Mr. Dan here, Dr. Dan, is a Red Cross trainer. He has held positions too in the Red Cross, but let's not get into all the many lists. It's going to be so long. We'll take all the time on the show.
Yeah.
Okay, today is not World Humanitarian Day, but this program is for the World Humanitarian Day. I think the very first thing we want to know is, are there international humanitarian laws? Are there laws that guide humanitarians on how they do things? And if there are, what are the humanitarian laws that you can tell us about on the show today?
Yes, for me, we have the ISHL, International Humanitarian Law. International Humanitarian Law is a law that regulates the activities of not just the international aid workers, but everybody, especially anybody that have anything to do at the international arena. Now, these laws are there to, direct, to, as a guide in whatever we're doing. For example, for us, from the Red Cross angle, whenever there is a disaster or we need for international aid, we'll be there. And there are principles that must guide us. For example, we have the principle of neutrality. We must be neutral in everything we are doing. And impartiality. So all of these principles we have, they are stemmed from the international humanitarian law. So for me, it's a good one, and because almost all the countries of the world are treated to it, as in they sign into it. Hence, the law is applicable anywhere, anytime, any day.
Okay, fine. All right, I do know that some people, I don't know if the mistake charity organizations for humanitarian bodies are did the same thing. If I have an NGO where we cater for orphans, and another person is a member of the UNICEF, are we all humanitarians?
Well, it depends on how you want to look at it. Largely, I would say yes, if we're speaking loosely. A humanitarian, if you go by dictionary definition, is anybody who's doing stuff, activities promoting human nature, culture, and environment, and all of that. But if you now want to go strictly speaking, there's also a dichotomy that needs to be drawn. As Ogadan said, at the international community, there ought to be an umbrella body, a lead agency that works, especially when crisis, there's a breakdown in crisis. So it depends on the context under which these bodies are working. So, like when you talked about IHL, you know that if there's a crisis, let's say it's armed conflict, or let's say it's natural disaster, in the case of armed conflict, you expect that maybe there are different parts, that are in disagreement. So IHL exists to guide, the aid working, ensuring that those who are not parts of the conflict are protected. So there has to be a way to organize the humanitarian front. You need to organize the aid delivery and all of those things, and that's why these things continue to happen. Because at the end of the day, you notice that when you have an emergency and then you cannot distinguish who are working for humanitarian purposes and who are those who are part of the problem, then there becomes what we call a humanitarian crisis.
Okay. All right, now talking about Africa, there seems to be a lot of physical combats going on right now. You go to Congo DR, there's a crisis there. Nigeria, I should have started with Nigeria. Nigeria, there's a very long-lasting, low-intensity war in Nigeria. It's not a big one like that, like the one happening in Yemen, but there is something actually happening right here. And I'm not talking of just Benue or Borno. Even in this part of Nigeria, we have Fulani crisis that seem like a war. We don't know why they're fighting, but there is a battle, and things are just very low-key. And all these many places, South Sudan, Somalia, Libya, and many other countries that might join in as the year progresses, because we've noticed that the number of crisis ravaged places are not dropping, they're actually increasing as the year goes. What can we do to stop all of these conflicts? Is it even possible? Dr. Dan.
Well, for me, it may not be possible, absolutely, because there's room for disagreement. However, it can be limited, because we don't have to be, we don't have to go to war to resolve issue or issues. If we have disagreement, we have dispute, we can call a roundtable meeting and resolve issues. I feel one of those things that is even aggravating it is when there's a communication gap. For example, I remember some years ago when during the fuel crisis, subsidy, You know, in the month, if I were actually triggered the riot or the fighting in Benin, was some information that was passed that morning that some of our brothers and sisters traveling to the north, in fact, they've killed almost all of them. Before you knew it, in fact, area was already burning, and other parts of the state. Meanwhile, at the end of the day, you find that that kind of information was actually not true. So we can, if we are able to manage our information and also manage ourselves, we can resolve issues that would not lead to crisis. And humanitarian aid workers now, in fact, as I speak, in fact, that led to the team, not a target. Because people are misguided. Today, humanitarian aid workers, they are being targeted. In fact, some months ago, you see that of Syria, even in Nigeria here, media may not hype it because we try to play low on media. However, people, they've left the essence of you know, these humanitarian aid workers coming to them. Now they are targeting them. Let me tell you the truth. What I like to know, the founder of Red Cross, Eridona, in fact, when he founded Red Cross, one of the questions he asked, he said, even though we fight, are we not brothers? If we agree we are brothers, can't we settle things amicably and not go to war? And if after we go to war, there should be rule guiding the rule of the game. Are you getting me now? So for me, we can reduce it to the barest minimum if the world leaders, if those in authority, because of course the common man in the street will not start this. The disagreement most time will come from the top, the leaders. And if they are courageous enough to face these issues squarely by calling for a meeting, roundtable meeting, where they can resolve all of these things, believe you me, most of these crises will go down. Are you getting me now?
Yeah.
They will actually go down.
Okay, now. Sorry, talking about Nigeria right now, let's even use the Fulani headsmen issues. Do we have the political will to put a stop to this?
Yes, for me, I will not subscribe to the word Fulani headsmen. I would just say headsmen.
Headsmen, okay.
It's better because as I speak today, anybody can be
a headsman.
So the headsman issue, yes, I still feel that it is the issue of communication. That is it. Communication. If we agree to live as one entity called Nigeria, it is time for us to sit down and define how we intend to live together. I think from my background, I read political science and public admin, so I know what I'm saying. That it's not easy for even you, if you're my brother or my sister, to live with me. Now you talk of someone that you don't even know how he or she was given birth to. And of course, considering the hostile environment, most of these persons grew up. So, but I feel the only way is for us to come down, where some may call it comfort, the way they did before. No, they didn't eat anything, I know. But I know that from the grassroots, from the unit, from the world, if we begin to pull weight from there. Because for me, solution will not come from the top.
Okay.
The solution to this country must come from the community. It must be a community-based approach in resolving this issue. We need to be able to talk to each other from the community level on how our terms and conditions, those principles we should share in terms of we want to be together. Okay, from there you move down to the local government, from there move, even the states. Do you know that even some states in Nigeria here, some persons they don't subscribe to the principle of that state. Even some community, they pay allegiance to the next state. If you go through, you see all of these things. So if you are able to look at these things and now redirect our entity called state, local government, and even world, right, that all of these things will come to pass. That's it.
Okay. I believe your time will come. The political will is available already. Okay, Tejuri, talking about the theme for this year's World Humanitarian Day, not a target. We see videos of the Red Cross, even in the rivers, the seas, trying to get migrants. You see them when there's a disease outbreak. You see them when there's a war. They're everywhere. They're always there. But what exactly is the World Health Organization, the United Nations, and all of these bodies coming together to say that, to say when they picked the team, not a target? Who are not the targets here that we're talking about?
It's a very, very good question, because it rocks at the very essence of World Humanitarian Day itself. Now, let me take you back to history of how World Humanitarian Day began. You have a UN aid worker and 21 of his colleagues who were killed, caused by a suicide bomb. Now, in commemoration of their heroics, their efforts in humanitarian service, World Humanitarian Day began. Now, the idea is, if you look at the founding of the Red Cross, you have two persons or two entities fighting. Now, people are killed. Persons who are not even fighting are killed. The question comes up, should you allow people die? People who do not have a business, who do not have a bearing on whatever has caused that crisis. Should you allow them die? We talk about biological weapons, we talk about all sorts of people. There are people who do not even have a clue what's going on, and yet they suffer the effect. These victims of crisis, they suffer consequences of this crisis. Now, you ought to be able to provide them some levels of relief from the things that they suffer from when they have no hand in it. Now, the problem comes up where you have aid workers like members of the Red Cross who are trying to reach these vulnerable people, these victims of crisis, and providing them the much needed relief. Now, the problem is strictly when you start to target these aid workers. I'll give you an instance. In the Battle of Solferino, you had the members of the Ottoman Empire, you had all, these two kingdoms fighting. And Henry Dunant, Swiss, had no business in there, was passing by, going about his business, and he saw persons who were wounded, soldiers from both sides. Now, going by IHL, if a soldier is non-combatant, is wounded and all of that, you ought to be allowed access to healthcare, access to food, access to all sorts of things, as far as he has surrendered and is POW, prisoner of war. Now, it is the aid workers that go to provide him the much needed relief. They are the ones that go to provide him communication. So if we have a flooding in this area, maybe it's caused by there's a dam at UBTH, for instance, and the dam has spilled over, is flooding the whole of this end of town. And then the residents on this side are saying, oh, we are suffering the effect. And then IGO says, it doesn't concern us. Aid workers should not pass through, maybe coming from Ring Road, should not pass through IGO to go and assist. You see that there's a problem. So if we allow aid workers work comfortably with all the protection they require, you see that everybody will be happy. So the team was well chosen to enable aid workers do their work. So it's now the responsibility of media houses like this to disseminate properly good information to every person, because the person who is living next door to you can turn out to be aggrieved tomorrow and seek other means to, you know, to pursue that grievance. So if the person understands that, okay, this person by virtue of is wearing this protective emblem, you know, needs to be allowed to work, then you see that aid work, the relief work becomes easier for everybody. So when we recognize that, okay, this person is a volunteer worker, is an aid worker, is a relief worker, especially as protected by emblems of relief such as this, the Red Cross, the Red Crescent, or the Red Crystal, then you see that aid work becomes a whole lot easier. So Not a Target enables all parties of any conflict, of any crisis, to recognize those persons who are working, who are no part of the conflict, those persons who are no part of the crisis, those persons who are working neutrally. And that's why the Red Cross as a movement is guided by 7 fundamental principles. Humanity, which is our first principle, because whatever we do is humanitarian based. Impartiality, because we don't take sides in any dispute. Neutrality, we remain neutral at all times. So even when we're working as assisting government in terms of healthcare and all of that, we remain neutral. We don't allow that influence us. You understand? So these are our top 3 principles that we work with. And then there's independence, there's voluntary service, there's unity, there's universality. We work with all of these things to ensure that whatever service we provide, especially to the communities, especially to the more vulnerable people, they are not influenced by factors that compromise or affect or aggrieve. Because when you're working with persons who are indigent, you're working with persons who are suffering from crisis, you do not want to be seen as taking sides with one side, because that will now compound the problem and endanger you yourself as an aid worker. So if people understand how we work, then it makes the work easier, because they too may need our services, they may need assistance, and then if we are not able to provide those assistance, then they don't get it.
Okay. All right, you just know that the volunteer workers, when there's a crisis, are not targets of war, and they should never be treated as such. And they said it will be neutral. It means that if someone is a suicide bomber, is trying to attack a place, and then the bomb exploded and the suicide bomber did not die, and there's a Red Cross official there, he or she will still go and attend to the suicide bomber. That's what they just said. Okay, well, we're talking about World Humanitarian Day and this 2018 STEM, which is not a target. And they've said that the major people who are not targets, I have 2 guests from the Red Cross, or a humanitarian organization. The major people who are not targets in a war are the humanitarian aid workers. Are there other people who shouldn't be targets in a war, apart from, okay, you said humanitarian and someone who's passing through, maybe you're passing through the region and all that. Any other?
Well, essentially, I don't want to get too deep into IHL, because these are IHL issues. And you know that in the Red Cross, we have international partners, like the ICRC is saddled with that responsibility of promoting IHL. So the Nigerian Red Cross complements the efforts that the ICRC puts in that light. Now, particularly persons who should not also be targeted are including media, because media has a lot of responsibility in documentation, preservation of history, a lot of archiving, there's a lot. So media ought to be protected too. Hospitals and health facilities ought to be protected, and things in that regard too. But essentially, a careful study of the IHL lists out all of these rules. As is often said in common parlance, every war has rules. So I think in the 3rd Geneva Convention in 1929, POWs were also not a target. That's even if the person were a combatant, like I said before, and has surrendered or is injured, is incapable of fighting, the person ought not to be targeted as well. But for the purpose of World Humanitarian Day, we want to focus more on the humanitarian aid workers, because a lot can be achieved when aid workers are protected. You understand? So we're looking at victims of crisis more especially, because there are persons who, besides the combatants who are no longer able to participate in the fighting, we have persons who were never even combatants at all. They ought to be protected. So the civilians, we have persons who are civilians, we have persons who are wounded, and we have persons who are victims. You understand? So these are persons who ought not to be targeted primarily, before we now even talk about the aid workers. So which is why in our responsibilities as humanitarians, and we are trying to reach these victims of crisis, we ought to be protected to be able to do that work. So we are the particular persons in focus right now who ought not to be targeted.
All right, now, moving beyond the team for this year, now you've done your work, you've saved a lot of people, you've risked your life, because many war laws, I mean, every war has its own rules. I don't know if they even obey them. A lot of people do not obey those war laws and rules, I believe. Now the war is over. We have a place that has been sacked. The people are fleeing, and maybe even in the process of running, they are even roped into more crisis in the place they are running to. So you run from Nigeria because Boko Haram attacked your village, and you enter the Mediterranean Sea, and then you might just drown. So all this crisis is finally over. How do we rebuild an urban city that has been sacked? In Borno State, as an example, we know that several villages were practically emptied. And then these people ran and they had an IDP camp. Let's not even get started on the things that go on in the IDP camps and investigations that are going on now. And we also know that they accuse aid workers and soldiers of some things. But let's leave that right now. How would you advise to rebuild a city that has been sacked from war?
Okay, before I go to that question or answer that question, I want to add to what he said before, that for me, the children are not to be targeted.
Okay.
Very well, children and women.
Oh.
Yes, children and women.
Yeah, I like that one.
And all those that are not fighting, not having any issue with fighting, they must not be targeted.
Yeah.
However, it's a pity that people don't follow the rule of the game. Okay. Now, going back to your question, how do we rebuild? Now, we must do that in synergy with government and other organizations. For the Red Cross, we cannot rebuild alone. The government, and we have, in fact, we even have the NEMA, the National Emergency Management Agency, and even the international donors. Now, you don't just start building. First is to clear the city, because as I speak now, such cities are already poisonous because of the chemicals they use in fighting, and even animals, dead people, they're already there. So you need to first of all clear the mess there first. So that's why you don't just rush into resettling them there. So when the government or the agency saddled with the responsibility of that, have done that, then government will now come up with a plan, or the authority involved will now come up with a plan. It's a multi-sectorial approach, where each of the sector will be handled, or by an organization, probably the Red Cross, who can key in from the area of psychosocial support and other relief materials and the rest. Now, there will be a plan, because if you rush in building the city, you may not get the right specification. So the architect, you have to come in, the land and survey, the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Health, and every other person involved will have to come in, meaning funding also comes. So Ministry of Finance and every other donor agency will come in, and we all come to a round table to itemize what we will do part time. But if that is not done, then you find that the city may collapse. The city will not be organized. You get it now? So it's not just what you want, it's not a political talk. No, it's holistic in nature, in rebuilding. Because it did not take a day, a month, 2 days, or years, 3 years to build that city before. Now, imagine a city that has been existing for the past 20, 30, even 100 years. Now, because of war, and the city was just wiped. Now you want to build it in 1 year. Are you getting me now?
Yeah.
Everything will amount to frustration again. We'll go back to square one again. So it's an holistic way, and we must have that synergy between the Red Cross and every other agency concerned to rebuild a sound city, and also put mechanisms in place to checkmate the health system, because the health facilities also were destroyed. And believe you me, that because the health facility was affected, you need to rebuild it, not even with the new technology, not with the old one. So it's expensive. So it's a multi-sectorial approach. It's going to be a multi-sectorial approach.
Okay, so everyone who's been screaming that the war is over in Borno, IDP camp at Wogwa, pack all of them, they should go home. Now you just heard that it's not going to be so easy as you're saying it. All right, I want to talk about funding. Okay. Yeah, a lot of monies are spent, and recently the UN has been screaming that the funds available is way, way lower than the funds needed. Well, how do you people get your funds? You individual members of the societies, they pay dues. How do they get the funding for all these big things? You travel and buy equipment, buy food, share for people self, even buy toys and give to refugees.
You see, the rebuilding work, as you mentioned, is not one person's job. There's a saying that everything left to everybody is left to nobody. So there's many approaches to it. But it's important that I stress the Red Cross responsibility in rebuilding.
Yeah.
You see, first of all, you cannot rebuild if you're hungry and I do not know that you are a diabetic and I want to cook what I like for you without asking you, and I put you in some problems. You may even have allergies to what I want to cook for you. So to a very large extent, if you are going to rebuild, you need to first know what it is that the community needs. So which is why the Red Cross functions in all its function as an auxiliary to government, especially where health is concerned.
Yeah.
So to a very, very large extent, funding, we work in conjunction with government. We get fundings from everywhere. The Red Cross is one of those organizations that is not limited in its source for funding, even though primarily, since we are working, as auxiliary to government, we expect that the government that is local to that formation of the Red Cross should be able to assist in its funding. But that does not mean that government alone can shoulder all of the responsibilities. If you can imagine the UN complaining a matter for funds, where it receives all its funds from all member state parties, then you can imagine just the Nigerian government and then the Nigerian Red Cross alone. So you have persons who, to a very, very large extent, are, you put the net worth of some singular individuals, it can trump the budget of the Nigerian state. You get. So to a very, very large extent, the Red Cross does not depend solely on one source of fund. We get support from donors, individual donors, corporate bodies. So, and support in this context is not necessarily just money alone, even though we know that money is important. If you donate 100 ambulances to the Red Cross, it makes it easier to organize patrols. If you donate other equipment, AEDs, things that make our work easier. If we say we write to you, say we need support relief materials to distribute for communities in these areas. I think it makes, so support in any context that can make our work easier is what we require. So while government will try, we still encourage them to do more in their capacity. We also appeal to individuals and corporate bodies to support as much as possible. So basically that is how our work is done, from support and that we receive.
Okay. Now, quickly, let's talk about your camp. I know there are two main things we need to talk about before we leave here. When there's a crisis, there's an explosion, and maybe a lot of wounded. So we have broken bones, we have stampedes, we have all sorts of wounds. Now, what are the kind of first aid that we can give to people in situations like that? So we'll just be having a free lecture. Then also, I know about the camp, so I don't know how I'm going to share it. We will talk about the camp.
TJ, you talk about the camp.
Okay, well, as I mentioned, it was yesterday I was on radio, I mentioned that the camp is at Urumi, Onewa in Urumi. Very, very interestingly, every year the Edo State branch of Nigerian Red Cross organizes a first aid, leadership and disaster management training camp. And the idea is the Red Cross will train all our volunteers. We ensure that all of our volunteers and members are properly trained such that they can respond to emergencies anywhere and at any time, where they are. So some of the courses that we're going to be doing at this year's training camp includes practical first aid. We also have leadership training, of course. We have standard first aid training, and then we have disaster management. So essentially, a lot of people do not understand the difference between these courses. Disaster is not first aid. There's a lot of other things that come into play when you're talking about disaster. You need to understand how to manage infrastructure. You need to know how to manage dead bodies. You need to know how to manage, psychosocial, psychology of people. You need to know how to rebuild community. All of these things we have talked about now in crisis, all of which are not first aid per se. So first aid is also a component of disaster management. So these are some of, that's why we have to separate, because if you have to give everybody all at once, their brain may probably just mix and match the information. But
okay.
The camp starts next week on the 19th till 25th. It's a 1-week program, and
on the 19th,
yes,
the World Humanitarian Day
yes,
proper.
Yes,
okay.
That's when it started. And interestingly, it's going to be live-in. It's camp, so you're living in. So persons who should not be afraid of, the fact that it's not go today and come tomorrow, or you look for a hotel to stay. It's housed in everybody. All the participants were all going to be staying together. Even I myself will be very much present there. So for more information, I'm sure persons can, contact the Red Cross. I don't know
how would they contact the Red Cross?
If you permit me to release a number.
Oh, please do.
Okay, so the number is very, very simple. It's 080 666 34101. I'll take that again. 080 666 34101. So if they call that number, they can get all the information.
Seriously, 666.
Yes.
Okay, so now there's a crisis. What can we do? Even though we don't have Red Cross training, maybe we might be able to help.
Oh, well, you might be able to help. The first help is to call for help. I normally tell people. So, it's either you're a first aider or you're a first killer. Okay. Because if you want to help and you don't know how to help, you may be killing the person unknowingly. For example, if you come across an accident scene and somebody is just lying down there inside the car because of the accident, and you move the person anyhow, you don't know if the person have sustained a fracture of the spine. And that may lead to permanent paralysis of that person. So your help wasn't good enough. So that's why for me, it's ideal for every member of the society to be trained on basic first aid. From the household, to the workplace, the school, you must be trained. And if you go to some of these advanced countries, you see first aid buses everywhere. Yeah. You can easily just access it and, deliver your first aid. But basically what you do, if you don't have first aid knowledge, is to call for help. Call for help. Call the Red Cross, call anybody you feel can assist at that moment if you don't know what to do. That is first aid you can give. Now, if you know what to do, for me, if I come across an accident scene, or maybe after riot or whatever, I will maybe sometimes park if I'm not if I'm disposed to that. I'll park and assess the situation. They will call triage, ability for me to look at the situation and know what to do and know who to treat first or assist first. That's called triage. Then if I'm able to do that, then I'll pick up my casualty and remove them from the danger. You must follow the principle of Dr. ABCD. And even we have even increased it down to less like that. But basically you should know, check for danger. Because I don't want to assist you and also endanger myself. So we will leave the danger zone. Then I will check if you can respond to me. by calling your names, by looking around, tapping your shoulders. If you can respond to me, then you will tell me what is actually happening. Then I will know what to do. But if you cannot respond to me, man, that is
serious one.
serious, meaning the person is unconscious. The first thing to do is to immediately check for the airways. Make sure the person is exposed to fresh air, and check for circulation. Breathing. If the person is breathing and there's circulation, there are ways to do that, very professional way to do that, then I can just place the person in what we call recoverable position or recovering position, where the person will relax. Then I will go for the ambulance or any car that that can use. But if the person is not breathing, no circulation, then I will commence CPR, cardiopulmonary resuscitation. But for me, I don't advise someone that is not trained to commence CPR, because if you commence CPR, you may also be endangering the life of that fellow. Because someone that is breathing, someone that is that has not really gone unconscious too far, and if you commence CPR on that person, you may be altering the rhythms of that person, and you cause more harm to that person. So for me, there's nothing I can really say here now until people subscribe to basic first aid, either from the Red Cross or any of the growing first aid agencies coming up. Okay, though the Red Cross, we are in the lead, we are the forefront of providing first aid, also training, building the capacity of people in terms of first aid. That's why we made it a culture. Every year, the Nigerian Red Cross and Edo State branch must go for camp for members and non-members alike. So we've written letters to schools. Okay, before they went on holiday, we wrote letters to school to send their, to even some parents to send their children down to the camp for training. Not basically because we want fun, we want to source for fun for the Red Cross. No, that's why even in our camp, we normally, in fact, we write letters to organizations begging them for food and other things. Yes, because we don't not charge, like that for.
Is there support?
It's just support. You get some, but our sole aim, and we have credible trainers on ground, well certified trainers, even some are even American trained on ground to build the capacity of both the Red Cross members and the general public so as they can respond adequately to first aid. I want to beg people to come because 2019 I may not be able to speak on that now. Are you getting me now? Okay. But I may not be able to speak on that. But I want people to have basic knowledge of first aid.
Okay. Teju, your last words on this
well,
show.
basically, what I still continue to appeal for is for persons to get more understanding about the Red Cross, because it's not very great, that at this point in time, a lot of people still not understand what the Red Cross does and how we function, because very largely the Red Cross is beyond first aid, even though first aid in Nigeria is our key competence. But a lot of things have gone, the Red Cross has gone beyond first aid. So the more persons learn, the more they avail themselves. Even you can come and be trained by the Red Cross in a lot of things, and I'm sure that you benefit yourself from it.
Yeah, I will definitely be there.
I'd like that. We were expecting you.
Of course. I think this is the third time I'm making that promise on air. I'm so ashamed of myself. But not to worry, I want to say thank you to these two humanitarians here. It's not your day yet, but we are starting the celebration really early. So WHD came early this year, so take it like that. From our team right here, I want to say thank you to the cameraman, to the program director, and everyone who's made this program a success today, and my guests for being here today. And you need to understand that a lot of people sacrifice their lives to ensure that humanity continues, and we're not just going into extinction. And one of those people we're talking about are the humanitarian aid workers. They go into places you would not dare go to. When we even talked about Ebola in Nigeria, where people were bathing with salt, people were volunteering to go to Gambia and all of those places to go help. So they do a lot. They do a lot. We cannot overemphasize what they do to ensure that we keep existing as a species on Earth. And we want to appreciate them today, that we recognize it, we see it, even though we don't say it all the time. We want to appreciate your efforts, and we want to urge you to keep going, and also implore others to join in this fight. I'm doing my own already. I'm doing media. It's part of it.
Sure.
So Join us and let's join hands together to help humanity. Thank you so much for being with us on the show today. Catch it up at 4 a.m. on GoTV tonight, should I say tomorrow morning, and then you can also watch the program on YouTube. All right, bye.